So we know that the Philadelphia 76ers are tight on cash. They are cash-strapped after re-signing Paul Reed, matching that offer sheet for the Utah Jazz. They are into the luxury tax right now. So to fill out this roster, they can really only afford vet min type of players. So on today's show, we're going to take a look at some of the top vet min players who make sense for Philadelphia. But first, make sure you subscribe to the channel, because when the Sixers make a signing, we cover it here on the show. We go in further detail about all of these acquisitions. That's what we've done with Patrick Beverley, Mo Bamba, Montrezl Harrell, Paul Reed, and that's why the channel has never done better than what it is doing so far this offseason. Join the movement. It's 76ers Now. I'm Chase Sr. So you take a gander at the Sixers' current lineup as currently constructed, and this would be the starting five if the season were to start tonight. James Harden would be your point guard, Tyrese Maxey as your two. You still have Tobias Harris coming off that disappointing season at that wing spot. PJ Tucker is in there for his defense. Hopefully this year he takes some more corner threes, locking it down at that 4 as he can guard a couple of wings on the floor. And then you have the reigning MVP in Joel Embiid. The bench, less of a question than it was just a few days ago. Patrick Beverley, one of your backups. You bring back Paul Reed. DeAnthony Melton is one of the top two-way backup guards who can really fortify that second unit across the NBA. You have Daniel House, who is coming back to Philly. Jaden Springer's been flashing throughout the NBA Summer League. The re-signing of Montrezl Harrell didn't make any sense. I'm curious to see what happens with Furkan Korkmaz, just because I'm not sure Philadelphia wants to bring him back on that price tag. Mo Bamba will be one of Joel Embiid's backups, and will Filip Petrusev actually make the roster? Nick Nurse, as we talked about here on the show, did spill the beans apparently on Tyrese Maxey's podcast, saying that Petrusev, the draft and stash from a couple of years ago who went to Gonzaga, will be on this team. So right around the corner, vet min free agent targets for Philadelphia. But how about today's poll question? I want you to grade the Sixers roster right now, NBA 2K style. So the meter here, 1 to 100. Let us know right now in the comment section. Vet min target number 1, Christian Wood. And it's actually somewhat surprising that he hasn't been picked up, and he could go for a vet min deal, because Christian Wood is a really solid player and brings value to Philadelphia here. Last couple of years, he's put up some really impressive numbers. It goes back to 2020, 2021 when he started to find a groove. 21 points, 9.5 rebounds, 37% from 3. Year after that, Houston Rockets again, 18 points per game, 10 rebounds per, 39%. Now, both of those teams in Houston, they weren't quality squads, right? So the number's a little bit inflated, but last year with a solid Mavericks team before they fell apart down the stretch and openly tanked, 16.5 points per game, 7 rebounds, 51.5% from the field, and 37.5% from three-point range. So the three-point numbers, a consistent theme here with Christian Wood. And that's why I think he's a pretty valuable player and would fit well on this team, even though there's a little bit of a logjam in that front court on the Sixers roster. Thoughts on him? He's a big who can stretch the floor. He has always been a very good three-point shooter. Clean form, high release, very difficult to defend. The problem with Christian Wood is this. He is an absolutely horrific, in the words of Nick Roloff, defender. He can't play on the defensive end of the floor. He is a turnstile on that end. So you get him for his offense, which is really good for a big, but on the defensive end, he's a sieve. Everywhere he's been, there have been cultural questions. He's been a problem in the locker room, complaining, not getting along with teammates. And I think that's also a reason why quality teams don't want to bring him in, because he's known to be somewhat of a locker room cancer. And then lastly with Christian Wood, a cheap stretch 4 is certainly intriguing. You might have to make some moves on this roster to maybe let go of a big, but you can make the argument that outside of Joel Embiid, Christian Wood might be the most talented and gifted big on this Sixers roster. But it's like you run into a person who you meet at the bar and immediately you know you're just not going to get down with them. You know, they're not cool. They're not going to be friends. Do they ever change? Oftentimes they don't. Can Christian Wood change? Maybe not. Vet min target number 2, Kelly Oubre Jr. This is if he's willing to take a vet min deal. Still young, athletic wing, coming off a season this past year with Charlotte, awful team where, yes, his numbers were a little bit inflated like Christian Wood's on some of those bad teams. 20 points per game, 43% from the field, almost 32% from three-point range. When he did play with the Golden State Warriors, that's when he struggled a little bit. So when he's been on quality teams, the numbers haven't been all that good. When he's been on a quality team like Golden State, that's when he struggled to find his groove coming in off the bench. He's a better, more consistent player when he's starting, but obviously for Philadelphia, he's not going to crack that starting five, barring injury. Thoughts on Oubre? I think he's still available for a reason. He's not the best defensive player. He would fulfill a need on the Sixers roster of being an athletic wing, which they currently lack and have failed to really address over the last couple of years. As evidenced by the numbers, he is not the most efficient player out there. Some nights, he'll look really good shooting the rock. Other nights, he won't be able to buy a bucket. He is an athletic wing, though, who can score. Backdoor cuts, certainly athletic enough to finish around the rim, absorb some contact because he can certainly leap. Corner three is probably where you want to have him. You don't want to have him chucking from the wing or from straight away. And he would bulk up this bench for Philadelphia, depending on what the price tag could be. Could be a pretty attractive player for the Sixers here in free agency. With that, let's ask you this. This will be our pinned comment. Make sure you head on down and drop those names. Who is your dream affordable free agent target on the vet min? It can be a player who we're talking about on the program today or somebody else. Either way, just let us know that name in the comment section. John Wall. So he has been holding workouts in Las Vegas throughout the NBA Summer League, and it's become increasingly clear that he might be completely washed, and this is what happens when you don't develop an outside shot. This past year with the Los Angeles Clippers, they needed somebody who could pressure the rim, take the rock to the 10, and really initiate that offense, just provide some ball pressure, right, on the offensive end. You know it's bad when they let go of John Wall and then brought in Russell Westbrook. 11 points per game last year for the Clippers, 5 assists. Here's the problem, though. 40% from the field, 30% from three-point range. And in 2 of the last 4 years, he hasn't even played. In 2021, 2022, it was because him and Houston couldn't reach a buyout. And then in 2019, 2020, it was the Achilles injury and then the affection that happened there. In 2020, 2021, he did put up solid numbers with Houston alongside Christian Wood, but that team back then was just not good. So you have to take that into account. A little bit of a grain of salt there with those statistics. Thoughts on Wall here as we continue to go player for player? He just might completely be cooked. And you can be athletic, but in today's NBA, when you're playing point guard, when you're playing shooting guard, taking it to the rim, throwing down some highlight-worthy dunks that are going to be shown on SportsCenter, that's cool and all. You have to be able to hit some outside shots. Similar plight to Russell Westbrook. When these guys came into the league, uber athletes, breathtaking athletes who could go rim to rim in a blink, and they could maneuver down the floor in beautiful fashion. Very few athletes have been able to show the level of explosion and speed with the ball in their hands like Russell Westbrook, John Wall, Derrick Rose. But what's a similar theme with a lot of those players? They decline very quickly, whether it be to injury or the lack of an outside shot. They never developed their three-point arsenal, and because of that, once their athleticism started to slip by the wayside, that's when their games declined. Not being able to shoot, a massive problem, but he's still somewhat athletic and create at least a little bit. You give him 10 minutes per night in the preseason, see what he can do. I might be willing to take a surprising flyer on John Wall. TJ Warren, like John Wall, hasn't played a lot of basketball over the last couple of years. He has been a player who has absolutely thrashed Philadelphia. And when he was playing in the NBA bubble, he was going off. What a weird time the NBA bubble was in 2020, by the way. Thank God we've come so far from those times. Warren has played, over the last 3 years, a total of 46 games. Back then, he was good for Indiana. This was a guy who kind of had a little bit of Kawhi Leonard to his game. Didn't really rely on the three-point shot, 3.5 three-point attempts per night, but use that body to kind of maneuver around the floor and get to that mid-range area to get a shot off. He was great that year, almost 20 points per game, 53.5% from the field, 40% from three, 3.5 3-point attempts per night. That was definitely a career year for a guy who up to that point had kind of been an NBA journeyman, spot role player, spot starter, but really the big problem with him, he's played a half season over the last 3. And then Terrence Ross. Terrence Ross, I actually still think can play, and he can help you out at that wing spot, which Philadelphia kind of needs right now. Last year, for a good Suns team, he's picked up and ends up playing pretty well. 8 points per game, 2.5 rebounds, 43% from the field, almost 37% from 3. He has been overshadowed and hidden by playing for a bad Orlando Magic organization for the last several years. Now, you look at his numbers in 2020, 2021, 2019, 2020. On bad teams, he's been able to find twine, put biscuit in the basket. On good teams, you're probably going to slot him in for about 8 to 10 points per game, a guy who can hit that 3 and create just a little bit. Now, let me tell you this, if the Sixers sign any of these players, if they make a signing in general, we're going to talk about those moves in depth right here on the show. That's why you hit that sub button. You also see the link down below. And if you want to share your thoughts on Philadelphia's offseason with me, you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and even Threads. It's the same handle on all of those platforms, at Chase_Senior. Appreciate y'all for watching the show. Hop on board and join the movement here at Chat Sports.